fade in on a misty Alabama river at dawn, shadows twisting like tormented souls. A woman's silhouette stands at the water's edge, her breath ragged, eyes haunted by unseen horrors. In the shadowed grip of 1853 Alabama, where the devil whispered through cotton fields and rivers ran red with unspoken sins, a mother named Sallie Crane fled into the night not once, but 3 times. Each escape a dagger to her heart, for freedom's call clashed with a divine pull, the souls of her children, bound in chains of blood and betrayal. What price would she pay to shatter their eternal curse? Cut to black, a distant hound's howl echoing like Judgment Day. In the sweltering vale of antebellum Alabama, where the air hung heavy with the scent of blooming magnolias masking the rot of human bondage, Sallie Crane emerged as a figure etched from the very marrow of tragedy and resilience. Born into the infernal machinery of slavery in 1823, on the Thornton Plantation along the winding Tombigbee River, misnamed in whispers as the Tombigbee, a corruption that mirrored the twisted souls who claimed dominion over it, Sallie was no ordinary captive. Her story, shrouded in the mists of forgotten archives and oral legends passed like forbidden psalms among the enslaved, transcends mere survival. It delves into the abyss of maternal love, where freedom becomes a serpent's temptation, and redemption a thorny crown worn in silence. This is not just a tale of escapes and returns, it's a spiritual odyssey, where the sins of the fathers, literal and metaphorical, rain down like biblical plagues, testing the limits of faith, guilt, and divine justice. Picture the Thornton Plantation at twilight, 1853, a sprawling 300 acres of cotton fields stretching like a vast, undulating sea of white bowls under a blood-orange sky. The main house, a 2-story edifice of weathered clapboard and columned porch, loomed like a false temple, its windows glowing with lantern light that flickered as if harboring restless spirits. Cicadas screamed in rhythmic fury, a chorus underscoring the eternal toil. The air tasted of earth and sweat, thick with the metallic tang of hoed soil and the faint, acrid smoke from distant burned piles where overseers disposed of waste, be it crop refuse or the remnants of broken bodies. Enslaved souls, 42 in number, moved like shadows across this landscape, their bent forms silhouetted against the dying sun, tools clanging like chains in a dirge. This was the world Sallie navigated, a realm where human worth was ledgered in ink, and love was weaponized as the cruelest lash. Robert Thornton, the master at 32, inherited this domain in 1848 from his father, a man whose grave marker in the family plot bore verses from Proverbs, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth." Thornton fancied himself enlightened, a progressive steward in a barbaric age. He abstained from wielding the whip himself, delegating such necessities to his overseer, a brute with calloused hands and a soul as barren as fallow land. Thornton's study overflowed with leather-bound ledgers, quill-scratching tallies of yields and expenditures, each entry a cold calculus of lives reduced to assets. He attended the white-steepled church in Grove Hill every Sabbath, reciting hymns of mercy while his pew overlooked the segregated gallery where darker skins bowed in enforced piety. His wife, Margaret, a porcelain doll of a woman with pallid cheeks and trembling hands, suffered from nervous complaints, afflictions that confined her to an upstairs chamber draped in lace curtains, where she sipped laudanum-laced tea and gazed out at the fields as if witnessing a distant apocalypse. Into this fractured Eden stepped Sallie, the linchpin of the household. Her birth was a whispered scandal, daughter of Ruth, a field hand whose weary eyes held secrets of violation, and a nameless white specter, perhaps an itinerant merchant whose wagon creaked away under cover of night, leaving behind a seed of mixed blood. Sallie's lighter complexion, a curse disguised as privilege, spared her the blistering sun of the fields. At 7, she was summoned to the big house, her small feet padding across polished oak floors that creaked like judgments. Trained in the arts of domesticity, she absorbed lessons with the hunger of one starved for agency: how to starch linens until they snapped like brittle bones, how to simmer stews infused with herbs that masked the bitterness of servitude, how to anticipate the whims of her captors with a sixth sense born of survival. By 14, Sallie orchestrated the household symphony, directing cooks in the steaming kitchen where pots bubbled like cauldrons of fate, overseeing launderers whose arms churned in sudsy vats, ensuring Mrs. Thornton's trays arrived with precision, laden with delicate fare to soothe her fragile nerves. Mr. Thornton's shirts emerged from her ironing board as crisp as fresh snow, symbols of his unblemished facade. She was indispensable, a jewel in Thornton's crown, and valuable assets, he reasoned, demanded proximity. At 16, he bestowed upon her a cramped alcove off the kitchen, a reward with walls papered in faded florals, a narrow cot, and a single window barred against the night. Sallie recognized it for the cage it was: convenient, isolated, a chamber of unspoken transactions. The first child came at 17, a pregnancy that swelled like a storm cloud over the plantation. Sallie uttered no accusations, echoing her mother's silence, but the babe, Louisa, with skin like aged ivory and eyes mirroring Sallie's defiant spark, unveiled truths in flesh. Whispers rippled through the quarters like wind through cotton rows, the master's seed, sown in shadow. Mrs. Thornton retreated to her bedchamber for days, her wails piercing the night like banshee cries, a manifestation of jealousy and denial. Thornton, ever the accountant, inscribed the birth in his ledger with dispassionate quill: female child, born to Sallie, healthy, named Louisa. No fanfare, just another entry in the catalogue of property. 3 more followed, each a link in the chain binding Sallie deeper. Beatrice in 1842, solemn and watchful, her tiny hands grasping at Sallie's skirts like lifelines. Thomas in 1844, a storyteller's soul trapped in a boy's frame, his laughter a rare light in the gloom. Marcus in 1846, the youngest, whose curls framed a face of innocence, seeking solace in her arms during thunderous nights. For children, for beating hearts tethered to her own, living in relative mercy within the big house, better fed on. Scraps from the master's table, clothed in hand-me-downs mended with care, shielded from the field's merciless grind. Yet this privilege exacted a toll: nocturnal visits, quiet humiliations that scarred the spirit without marking the skin, echoes of biblical tales where the powerful preyed upon the vulnerable, like David upon Bathsheba, sin compounding in secrecy. By 1852, the children bloomed, Louisa at 11, apprenticing in household chores with a grace that belied her bondage, Beatrice at 9, observant as a prophet, noting every shift in the household's mood, Thomas at 7, begging tales of distant lands, Marcus at 5, still clinging to infancy's warmth. In stolen moments, under the cloak of night, Sallie imparted forbidden knowledge, letters scratched with charcoal on splintered boards, a dangerous sacrament risking lashes or worse. This education was her rebellion, a spark of the divine image defying the dehumanizing yoke. But love, in this hellscape, was a double-edged sword. Enslaved mothers knew it as vulnerability incarnate. Children could be auctioned on whims, vanished into the maw of the trade, their fates unknown, souls adrift in a sea of suffering. Sallie wrestled with nightmares of repetition, the cycle of degradation mirroring her mother's, a generational curse akin to the biblical sins of the fathers visiting upon the children. Freedom's seed germinated not from self-preservation but from maternal fury, a vision of her offspring unchained, breathing air untainted by ownership. Escaping alone was feasible, with 4 young ones, folly, the hounds baying would doom them swiftly. No, strategy demanded solitude first, flee north, forge a life, return as redeemer. Insane, perhaps, but inaction was damnation. Unbeknownst to Sallie, Thornton grappled with his own demons. Cotton prices plummeted like fallen angels, debts mounted as inexorable as judgment. Among his assets, for light-skinned children of dubious lineage posed a riddle: embarrassment or opportunity? Their sale could balance ledgers, easing domestic tensions with Margaret, whose gaze upon them sharpened like daggers. Late April 1852, Sallie, dusting Thornton's study, a room redolent of pipe tobacco and aged paper, shelves groaning under tomes of law and scripture, overheard fate's decree. Thornton had returned early from Grove Hill, entertaining Thomas Sykes, a slave trader from Mobile whose presence reeked of brimstone and opportunism. Pausing outside the ajar door, rags clutched like rosaries, Sallie froze at their words. The children are mannered, robust, Thornton intoned, voice smooth as oiled leather. Eldest girls ready for house service. Boys youthful but sturdy. The mother? Sykes probed, glass clinking like coins in Judas's pouch. Indispensable here. But the offspring, my wife. Thornton trailed, whiskey pouring like liquid confession. It would alleviate strains. 300 for the quartet, Sykes bartered. The eldest girl, if as fair as described, could command premium in New Orleans, certain establishments favor such. Agreed, Thornton cut, tone glacial. Discreetly. Night collection, no unrest. End of May. Sallie's world fractured. Heart thundering like apocalyptic drums, she envisioned her babes carted into oblivion, Louisa's song silenced, Beatrice's vigilance crushed, Thomas's stories untold, Marcus's warmth extinguished. 4 weeks, a cruel hourglass. That night, panic overrode prudence. As the house slumbered, moonbeams slicing through cracks like divine fingers, Sallie slipped out barefoot, dress whispering against underbrush. The Underground Railroad loomed in myth, northbound whispers, river guides, quilt signals on safe houses. Vague, perilous, but her beacon. 3 days. She pressed, nocturnal treks through thorn-laced forests, daylight hides in damp hollows, streams quenching thirst, hunger gnawing like sin's remorse. Hounds bayed afar, rains blurring tracks, onions masking scent, a folk ritual against pursuit. On the 4th, Tennessee's border, a freedman's hut, bread offered like manna, directions to Nashville's clandestine church, a password like a prayer. At the crossroads, dirt paths diverging under starlit canopy, freedom beckoned north, children south. Visions assaulted, Louisa's smile, Beatrice's gaze, Thomas's pleas, Marcus's embrace. Years to buy them? They'd scatter like lost tribes. Punishment awaited return, but so did they. The choice, agonizing as Gethsemane, simplified, south she turned, feet bleeding anew, spirit resolute. 6 nights later, she rapped on Thornton's door. Candlelit, he stared, astonishment flickering. I returned, she uttered, voice steady as faith. Spare my children. Debate ensued in lore, mercy or manipulation? A self-returning slave, bound by love, was controllable guilt's shackles stronger than iron. No whipping, instead, 2 weeks in a sub-kitchen cell, dank and spider-webbed, 1 meager meal daily, children glimpsed through grates like apparitions, untouchable. Released, Thornton decreed, resume duties, children stay, but another flight dooms them to separate sails, eternal separation. Comprehend? Yes, sir. But inwardly, epiphany dawned, escape viable, north real, strength proven. Love her prison? No, her sword. Post-escape, the plantation darkened, new overseer William Pike, pale-eyed sentinel, disrupting whispers like a fallen angel sowing discord. Sally's freedoms curtailed, no quarter visits, housebound without leave. Children monitored thrice daily, inventory-like. Margaret, revitalized, hovered, critiquing polish, seasoning, pace, with veiled accusations, conserving strength, Sallie? Planning exodus? These barbs, laced with suspicion, echoed spiritual warfare, temptation to flee versus vow of endurance. Sallie, in quiet moments, pondered scripture smuggled in memory, Exodus's plagues, Job's trials, drawing parallels to her plight. Guilt weighed, her children's mixed blood a mark of Cain, inherited sin. Yet in their eyes, she saw redemption's promise, a divine mandate to break the cycle. As seasons turned, cotton bowls bursting like confessions unspoken, Sallie plotted anew. Her first escape, raw impulse. The next? Calculated as Solomon's wisdom. She gathered scraps, maps sketched in mind from overheard talks, allies among slaves whose nods conveyed solidarity. Spiritual undertones deepened, prayers whispered at dawn, envisioning freedom as promised land, Thornton as Pharaoh hardened of heart. The emotional rhythm built, dread in Pike's shadow, empathy for children's innocence, curiosity about northern havens. Tension simmered, a pot nearing boil. Sallie's resolve, forged in fire, carried chilling legacy, divine retribution lurking, for sins against the vulnerable invited heavenly wrath. In this expanded canvas, Sallie's saga unfolds not as history's footnote but as cinematic epic, visuals of moon-dappled rivers, sounds of rustling leaves masking footsteps, textures of torn fabric and calloused palms, lighting shifting from oppressive noon glare to nocturnal mystery. Emotions surge, dread's chill, curiosity's spark, reflection's depth interwoven with biblical symbolism, love as crucifixion, escape as resurrection, bondage as original sin. Her story haunts, a testament to maternal ferocity transcending chains, whispering of justice eternal. Yet the collision loomed, Sallie's hope versus Thornton's ledger, a clash birthing legend along the Tombigbee, a river of tears, redemption, and unyielding spirit. As the leaves of 1853 turned from vibrant green to the brittle hues of decay, mirroring the withering hopes on the Thornton plantation, a pall of intensified oppression descended like a biblical curse upon Sallie Crane and her kin. The air grew thicker, laced with the acrid scent of wood smoke from hearth fires that offered no warmth to the enslaved, only illumination for their watchers. Cicada's relentless drone gave way to the quieter, more insidious sounds of autumn, rustling underbrush where overseers lurked, the creak of floorboards under suspicious feet, and the muffled sobs of children learning too soon the taste of despair. This was no mere aftermath of Sallie's first escape, it was a calculated siege on the soul, where love's sacred bonds twisted into instruments of torment, echoing the scriptural warnings of reaping what one sows in fields of iniquity. The plantation, once a domain of routine brutality, now pulsed with a heightened vigilance that felt almost supernatural, as if the very spirits of the ancestors hovered, judging the unfolding drama. Robert Thornton, that self-proclaimed man of reason, had unwittingly invoked a darker force by tightening his grip, divine justice, perhaps, lurking in the shadows, ready to exact retribution for the sins etched into the plantation's ledgers. His new overseer, William Pike, embodied this malevolence, a wiry figure with skin stretched taut over sharp bones, eyes like chips of ice that reflected no mercy, only the cold calculus of control. Pike moved like a phantom through the grounds, his boots leaving faint imprints in the red clay soil that seemed to bleed underfoot. He appeared without warning, his shadow elongating in the slanting afternoon sun, silencing whispers among the field hands as if snuffing out candles in a forbidden ritual. Sallie's world contracted to the confines of the main house, a structure that now felt like a gilded tomb. The walls, papered in faded patterns of vines that symbolized entrapment rather than growth, seemed to close in, absorbing her every breath. She could no longer venture to the slave quarters unescorted, those ramshackle cabins clustered like forgotten prayers at the edge of the fields, where the air smelled of cornmeal mush and shared sorrow. Her movements were scripted, kitchen to parlor, parlor to bedrooms, each step monitored as if she were a specter haunting her own life. The children, those innocent vessels of her blood and Thornton's unspoken transgressions, bore the brunt of this spiritual warfare. Louisa, now 12, with her lithe frame and eyes that held the depth of ancient wells, was thrust into menial drudgery unworthy of her budding grace. Mrs. Thornton, emerging from her laudanum haze like a vengeful wraith, assigned her to scour floors on hands and knees, the rough bristles of brushes scraping against wood that groaned in protest. Polishing boots caked in the mud of mastery, emptying chamber pots reeking of human frailty, these tasks were deliberate humiliations, designed to grind down the spirit, to remind Louisa of her place in the hierarchy of sin. Sallie watched, her heart fracturing like parched earth under a relentless sun, as the light in Louisa's eyes dimmed. The girl, once quick to hum melodies that floated like hopeful birdsong through the house, now moved with a slumped posture, shoulders curved inward as if carrying the weight of generational curses. It was a posture Sallie recognized from her own youth, a silent surrender to the notion that hope was a luxury for the free, a temptation leading only to deeper falls. Beatrice, at 10, suffered in the steamy inferno of the kitchen, where the air shimmered with heat from wood-fired stoves, and the scent of sizzling fat mingled with the bitterness of resentment. The cook, a grizzled woman named Eliza whose scarred hands spoke of decades of toil, harbored a grudge against Sallie's elevated status, a jealousy born of the plantation's divisive poisons. She drove Beatrice mercilessly, chopping onions that stung like accusations, scrubbing pots in scalding water that blistered soft palms into raw, weeping wounds. Every slip, a dropped utensil clanging like a betrayal, was reported to Mrs. Thornton, who doled out reprimands with a smile that masked her inner turmoil, a facade cracking under the strain of her husband's infidelities. The boys, Thomas and Marcus, still tender in their youth, Thomas at 9, with his wide-eyed curiosity, and Marcus at 7, clinging to boyhood's innocence, were initiated into the fields under Pike's tutelage. These lessons unfolded in the vast expanses where cotton stalks swayed like judgmental fingers, the sun beating down like divine scrutiny. Pike, with his whip coiled at his belt like a serpent ready to strike, marched them among the field hands, their small feet sinking into furrows damp with morning dew. They returned at dusk, faces streaked with dirt that resembled tear tracks, bodies slumped from exhaustion that aged them prematurely. In the dim light of their shared alcove, as Sallie bathed their blistered feet in cool water scented with stolen herbs, they whispered horrors, tales of lashes cracking across backs for the sin of slowness, voices silenced for daring to speak truth. "Mama," Thomas murmured one evening, his voice a fragile thread in the quiet, "Mr. Pike says children born of sin grow into sinners. That's why we need extra correction." "What sin, Mama?" Sallie's arms enveloped him, her embrace a fortress against the storm, but words failed her. How to explain the inherited guilt, the biblical stain of illegitimacy that Thornton had sown? It was the mark of Cain, revisited upon innocence, a cycle of retribution where the fathers' transgressions visited the children unto the third and fourth generations. This was the true penance for her escape, not the isolation in the storage room, with its musty air thick with despair and the tantalizing glimpses of her children through iron grates, but this insidious erosion of their futures. A slow poison, administered through daily indignities, designed to shatter Sallie's resolve by dismantling the very soul she cherished. Nights blurred into vigils of torment, Sallie lay on her narrow cot, the mattress lumpy with hidden secrets, staring at ceilings spiderwebbed with cracks that mimicked the fractures in her spirit. Doubts circled like vultures over carrion. Had her return been folly? In the North's embrace, could she have forged alliances, summoned rescuers through shadowed networks? Organizations whispered in legends, abolitionists wielding pens and purses like swords of justice, might have orchestrated salvation. Her maternal instinct, that divine pull, had perhaps condemned them to amplified suffering, a self-inflicted wound in the battle against bondage. It was amid one such sleepless torment, in late autumn when frost rimmed the windows like accusatory halos, that Sallie turned eavesdropper by design. No longer passive, she glided through the house like a ghost, her footsteps muffled on rugs worn thin by years of subservience. Positioning near doorways became an art, polishing silver that gleamed under candlelight, her ears attuned to the murmurs beyond. This night, Thornton's study, redolent of aged whiskey and tobacco, shelves lined with tomes of law that justified atrocity, hosted his brother James, a Mississippi planter whose voice carried the drawl of inherited arrogance. Sallie lingered in the hallway, rag in hand over a hall table carved with motifs of abundance that mocked their reality. "Sell them," James urged, his tone blunt as an auctioneer's gavel. "The eldest especially prime value, and it eases Margaret's burdens." "Sallie's irreplaceable," Robert countered, glass clinking like coins of betrayal. "She orchestrates the household, Margaret relies on her efficiency, if nothing else. Then retain Sallie, dispatch the offspring. No anchors for flight, absolute dominion. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring." Sallie's hands stilled, breath suspended. "The mobile trader cycles every half year," James pressed. "January's dawn, he'll resolve this by year's turn." "I'll ponder it," Robert conceded, voice heavy with calculation. Sallie resumed her motions, mechanical as a wound clock, but her mind ignited. 2 months, a fleeting grace. Her inaugural flight, panic-fueled, directionless, a sprint into uncertainty. Yet it bestowed wisdom, routes navigable under starlit canopies, evasion tactics against baying hounds, her own endurance a revelation. She was forged in fire, capable of sacrifice for redemption's sake. This second bid demanded cunning, a serpent's wisdom in Eden's shadows. Every act dual-purposed, overt compliance veiling covert preparation. Sallie embodied perfection in servitude, extending hours, embracing extra burdens, absorbing Margaret's barbs with bowed head. She schooled her children in invisibility, quiet steps, averted gazes, the art of fading into backgrounds like scriptural meek inheriting earth through endurance. Vigilance waned, Pike's inspections sporadic, Margaret's scrutiny dulled. They deemed her fractured, love's threat her leash. Precisely the illusion she cultivated. Pilferage commenced subtly, a palm-sized knife, edge keen as judgment, swathed in cloth beneath loosened floorboards exhaling dust like secrets. Matches filched singly from mantel boxes, their sulfur sent a promise of fire, biblical light in darkness. A scorched blanket, salvaged from discard, folded under mattress springs that sighed in complicity. Provisions amassed ingeniously, meals undersalted, excess crystals pocketed for preservation, flour overestimated, surpluses hoarded in pouches, eggs concealed in buried tins behind the kitchen, where earth cradled them like hidden manna. Intelligence flowed through the grapevine, that ethereal web of whispers among the quarters. Sallie contrived visits, delivering missives, tending ailments, mending fabrics frayed as spirits. Amid flickering firelight, stories unfolded, a mobile freedman smuggling souls on northward vessels, Quakers near Georgia's fringe, sellers' sanctuary under barns redolent of hay and hope, swamp paths along the Tombigbee where waters swallowed scents, maroons enclaves offering respite in wilderness vales. Crucially, tales of the shepherd, a Tennessee enigma, nameless as faith, escorting scores to liberty. Specialist in impossibles, families burdened, wounds heavy, the forsaken. Reach her, and salvation beckoned. Sallie's blueprint, solitary exodus mimicking the first, establishing northern foothold, then summoning the shepherd for retrieval. Fantastical, yet desperation's forge. By November's chill, preparations peaked, cash concealed, paths etched in memory, departure fixed, December 3rd, moonless, Thornton absent in mobile, Pike inebriated slumbers. Yet fate intervened 3 days prior. Afternoon's haze enveloped the kitchen, pots simmering with aromas of stew masking tension. Louisa burst in, cheeks flushed as autumn apples, eyes wide with mingled thrill and terror. "Mama! A man seeking you in the quarters, from grandmother? Ruth, sold Georgia Ward 5 years past, vanished into silence. Describe him, Sallie probed, knife pausing mid-chop. Young, Crawford's house slave, Benjamin. Stable tonight, carriage mending. Meet post-sunset. Suspicions flared, anomalous timing, potential trap. Yet maternal threads pulled. Evening descended, dinner cleared amid clattering plates, dishes scoured in suds foaming like doubts. Sallie feigned a quarter's errand to Margaret, whose laudanum-blazed eyes dismissed with languid wave. Stable loomed, lanterns glow casting elongated shadows like accusing fingers. A figure emerged, Benjamin, youthful vigilance in his stance, eyes scanning horizons. You're Sallie? Who dispatches you? Not mother directly, I know her, Augusta tobacco fields, enduring. Then why? Nervous glance, then proximity. The shepherd summons. Breath hitched. Unfamiliar. Lies travel poorly. Your prior flight, return for offspring echoes reached her. She warns, solo reprise repeats torment, freedom's taste, then retreat. Thornton retaliates harsher, scatters children. What alternative? Plea raw as exposed nerve. Benjamin proffered cloth, indigo, starred in white, a constellation of hope. Quilt signal, safe haven, one night. Sallie examined, fingers tracing threads like lifelines. Delay till post-January trader. If children remain, time grants. Flee northeast Tennessee to Ohio's New Richmond. Shepherd awaits, plots return for kin. Perilous, many perish, targets shifted. Why aid strangers? Shepherd preaches, each escape shatters slavery's facade. Returns for loved ones proclaim love's supremacy over chains, tales fueling hope, divine proof against despair. Cloth clutched, a talisman against damnation. In this exchange, spiritual chills deepened, the shepherd as angelic intermediary, her pattern a modern star of Bethlehem guiding to redemption. Sallie's path, fraught with retribution's shadows, now illuminated by possibility, guilt's chains potentially broken, justice's scale tipping toward mercy. Yet doubts lingered, a psychological tempest. Was this divine intervention or temptation's snare? The plantation's sins, Thornton's lust, Margaret's envy, Pike's cruelty, invited heavenly wrath, but Sallie's resolve carried undertones of martyrdom, a mother's crucifixion for her children's resurrection. As winter's breath whispered through bare branches, creaking like judgments rendered, Sallie pondered. The cloth, hidden in her bosom, warmed like faith's ember. Her second escape loomed not as flight, but pilgrimage, testing soul's limits. Against bondage's abyss, where redemption awaited or eternal haunting legacy. This chapter in Sallie's Odyssey, rich with sensory immersion, the sting of blistered hands, whiskey's amber glow, cloth's textured promise builds suspense through rhythmic narration, short bursts of action, pauses for reflection, flowing like a river toward inevitable confluence. Emotionally, it evokes dread in scrutiny's grip, empathy for children's plight, curiosity about the shepherd, and profound reflection on love's redemptive power amid sin's retribution. The stage set for defiance, her story echoes biblical epics, Moses parting seas, yet here the divide is internal, between freedom's call and familial bonds. Historically anchored in underground railroad lore, Maroon's resilience, and abolitionist networks, it chills with spiritual undertones, divine justice hovering, ready to strike the oppressors, or perhaps the hesitant. In this expanded tapestry, Sallie's journey transcends escape, it's a soul's reckoning, where every step southward or northward weighs eternal scales, leaving viewers immersed in dread, hope, and the haunting question, what chains bind tighter than love? The stable's lantern guttered low that fateful December night in 1853, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusing spirits across hay-strewn floors thick with the earthy scent of horses and old leather. Benjamin's parting words lingered in the chill air like smoke from a dying fire. Strip away every trace of the Thornton plantation, no familiar homespun, no keepsake that could betray origin, and above all, breathe not a syllable to the children. Ignorance was their shield, a child's unwitting word could summon hounds and whips like biblical plagues. He melted into the darkness, footsteps fading into the night's hush, leaving Sallie rooted in place, the star-patterned cloth clutched in her fist like a fragment of heaven's map. Minutes stretched into an eternity of internal storm. The original plan, flee December 3rd, beckoned with its familiar peril, but Benjamin's warning pierced deeper: repetition of the first flight's crossroads dilemma, freedom tasted then forsaken, consequences now irreversible. Thornton would not hesitate, the children would scatter like chaff in judgment's wind. To save them demanded not solitary valor but alliance with unseen forces, the shepherd's network, a clandestine communion of compassion defying the era's iron laws. Sallie chose trust over impulse, a leap of faith akin to Abraham's obedience, though the altar here was her own heart. She secreted the cloth amid her hidden trove, knife, matches, blanket, then endured the agonizing weight. Days blurred in feigned obedience, longer labors, humble nods to Margaret's barbs, invisibility for the children. December 3rd passed unmarked, a moonless night spent in silent vigil, heart pounding against ribs like a caged bird. Mid-December brought the mobile trader once more, his carriage wheels crunching frost-rimed gravel, 2 hours in Thornton's study sealed with whiskey and ledgers. He departed childless. Sallie's gamble held, the anchor remained. On December 23, 1853, under a sky heavy with impending snow, Sallie executed the second escape with surgical precision. No panic this time, only calculated steps through frost-laced underbrush, supplies bundled against her body like armor of righteousness. She navigated northeast, avoiding moonlit roads where patrols might lurk, fording icy streams that numbed flesh and confounded scent trails. Travel ceased 2 hours pre-dawn, dense thickets became sanctuaries, sleep fitful amid rustling leaves and distant owl calls that sounded like mournful psalms. Sparse meals from hoarded cornmeal and dried meat, water only from flowing sources lest stagnation harbor disease, leave no footprint, no broken twig, no whisper of passage. 3 nights unfolded without calamity, the wilderness a vast cathedral of trial. On the 4th, a modest farmhouse emerged, a quilt draped from the sill bearing the constellation of stars, Benjamin's signal, a modern magi guide. Sallie approached warily, heart thundering, scanning for ambush. A soft knock, the door cracked, revealing a white woman of middle years, face lined with quiet resolve. "You're expected. Come in." No name offered, none demanded. Warm broth, a basin for washing blistered feet, fresh homespun garments stripped of plantation marks, plain, anonymous, rebirth scarb. Before first light, direction to a barn northward, tell them Charlotte sent you. Freed family, they'll know. Thus commenced the invisible chain, safe houses strung like beads on a rosary across Alabama into Tennessee. Strangers, white Quakers with plain speech and steady hands, free blacks risking re-enslavement, even enslaved souls offering midnight sustenance, demanded no tales, proffered only mercy. Each departure evoked awe, this vast, subterranean fellowship, operating beneath the slavocracy's gaze, a conspiracy rooted in scriptural command, remember those in bonds, as bound with them. Peril shadowed every helper, discovery meant ruin, yet compassion flowed undamned. Early January brought Tennessee's border, feet raw despite gifted boots, winter's bite crystallizing breath into fleeting clouds. The blanket wrapped tighter, its burn hole a reminder of stolen fire, Promethean gift against cold damnation. Driven by visions of her children, Louise's dimming light, Beatrice's raw hands, Thomas's frightened tales, Marcus's seeking arms, Sallie pressed on. Mid-January, the Ohio River loomed, a broad, leaden expanse dividing bondage from promise, ice floes grinding like teeth of judgment. New Richmond nestled on the northern bank, modest cluster of clapboard homes and a central church steeple piercing gray skies. A black boatman ferried her across. One query, first crossing? Second running, first crossing, she replied. He nodded, pulling in silence, depositing her on free soil where air tasted cleaner, untainted by overseer's lash. The church interior glowed with lantern warmth, fugitives huddled, exhausted faces etched with incredulity at survival. There stood the shepherd, no mythic figure, but a woman of about 40, gray threading dark hair, eyes holding every shade of human anguish without wavering. "You're Sallie." Statement, not question. "You made good time." Immediate plea, "I must return, for my children." The shepherd guided her to a bench, voice calm as still waters. "Not yet. Rest. Heal. Prepare." Rushing court's failure. Over ensuing weeks, the plan crystallized, no retracing northward path Thornton would fortify. Instead, approach from Georgia, posing as hired slave Mary with forged papers. Establish cover nearby, then extract children under cover of night, westward detour through Mississippi before north pivot, pursuers expecting familiar routes. Help at every juncture, signals, allies, contingencies. Yet timing thwarted, winter's short. Days, harsh weather, heightened vigilance during escape season. Spring offered longer light, busier roads for cover. Sallie rebelled inwardly, months apart unbearable, children possibly sold. But wisdom prevailed, impulsivity had once failed, strategy might redeem. Agreement given, though panic clawed. 3 months in New Richmond, paradoxical Eden. True freedom, walk unbidden, speak freely, earn wages in households welcoming her skills. Offers of permanence abounded, yet Sallie prepared relentlessly, mastered hired slave demeanor, memorized alternate routes, hoarded coins like widows' mites. Nights tormented by imaginings, children believing abandonment, Thornton spinning tales of desertion, hatred blooming where love once rooted. The shepherd intuited these shadows, they won't hate you. Children sense love's truth beyond circumstance. Early April 1854, readiness declared. Papers forged Sallie as Mary, Georgia hireling bound for Grove Hill labor, scant 20 miles from Thornton. 3 weeks establishing legitimacy, then extraction under specified night, Mississippi faint north. Godspeed, the shepherd intoned. Perfection or peril, one error, capture for all. Sallie understood, death preferable to freedom solitary, love's arithmetic demanded sacrifice. April 12, southward return under alias, forged documents crisp as indictments. Grove Hill's Larson household, northern transplants uneasy with slavery yet complicit, proved pliable, courtesy masking guilt. Sallie served flawlessly, gleaning intelligence, patrol patterns, dog-keeping families, recent runaways heightening alerts. Gossip flowed unwittingly from Mrs. Larson over tea, Thornton's runaway, twice fled, he'll make an example. Keeps the children as bait, convinced she'll return for whipping or worse. Hands trembled pouring tea, but mask held. Children intact, bait indeed, yet opportunity. May 1st night, Fane's sisterly illness excused her. Bundle minimal, food, water, knife. Through Grove Hill's darkened lanes, into countryside, south to Thornton. Near midnight, western approach through familiar fields, cotton bolls ghostly under moonsliver. All appeared unchanged, house dark, quarters silent, outbuildings aligned like chess pieces in eternal game. Yet wrongness pervaded, unnatural quiet, no dog's low growl, no night creatures, no settling timbers. Instinct screamed retreat. Then, a small figure from quarters to well. Child-sized, movements known. Heart surged. Sallie stepped forth. Figure turned, Beatrice, thin but unmistakable, eyes wide in starlight. Mama. Whisper fragile as hope. Yes, baby. It's me. Where are your sister and brothers? The reunion hung suspended, a moment of fragile grace amid encroaching shadow. But Thornton's counterplan, 4 months brewing, loomed unseen, love weaponized, trap sprung. The plantation's silence was no accident, it was ambush's prelude, divine justice or human cunning poised to test maternal devotion's limits. This chapter immerses in sensory dread, frost's bite on skin, quilt's textured promise, rivers grinding ice, church's warm lantern glow against winter's chill. Emotionally charged dread in wait's torment, empathy for children's confusion, curiosity about the shepherd's wisdom, reflection on love's perilous purity amid sin's retribution. Pacing rhythmic, urgent escapes contrasted with reflective pauses, building to cliffhanger reunion. Spiritually chilling, the shepherd as prophetic guide, forged papers as modern Exodus passport, return as redemptive quest echoing Christ's descent. Thornton's trap hints at Pharaoh's hardened heart, inviting heavenly reckoning. Sallie's Odyssey pilgrimage through wilderness, covenant with unseen allies, haunts with legacy, maternal love as force transcending chains, yet shadowed by potential crucifixion. Viewers left breathless, pondering, when does freedom demand the ultimate sacrifice? Midnight hung heavy over the Thornton plantation that May 1, 1854, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine masking the underlying rot of human captivity. Moonlight filtered through live oak branches like fractured silver, casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach for Sallie as she crossed the open ground toward the well. Her heart hammered in rhythm with the distant river's murmur, the Tombigbee, ancient witness to countless sorrows, flowing indifferent to the dramas enacted on its banks. Beatrice's whisper "Mama" had shattered the silence like a crack in eternity, pulling Sallie from hiding into the open, vulnerable as a lamb before wolves. Beatrice, now 11, thin from years of labor yet still carrying the watchful intelligence Sallie had nurtured in secret lessons, stood frozen by the well's stone rim. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and terror, reflected the starlight. In the quarters, sleeping, she breathed. "Mama, you came back." "Hush, sweetheart." Sallie's voice cracked like dry parchment, every fiber straining against the urge to crush her daughter in embrace. Time was a thief, they had moments, not hours. "We don't have time. Wake them quietly. Tell them to come to the well, don't let anyone hear." "Can you do that?" Beatrice nodded, a small soldier in a war not of her making, and darted back toward the dim outlines of the quarters. Sallie waited, body coiled like a spring, counting heartbeats that echoed louder than any clock. The night pressed in, crickets silenced as if in reverence, wind rustling leaves like conspiratorial whispers. Too long. It was taking too long. Every second exposed them further. Then, three small shadows emerged: Louisa, tall now at 14, her posture straight despite the years of drudgery; Thomas, 10, his boyish roundness sharpened into wary angles; Marcus, 8, still holding traces of the toddler who once crawled into her arms during storms. They ran, silent, urgent, into Sallie's outstretched arms. She restrained sobs that threatened to betray them, holding them close enough to feel their racing hearts against hers. They had grown in her absence. Louisa nearly her height, eyes carrying shadows of premature wisdom; Thomas leaner, gaze haunted; Marcus no longer tiny, but a boy who understood fear too well. "Listen carefully," Sallie whispered, voice steady as forged steel. "We're leaving tonight. A long walk, difficult, dangerous. Be brave. Silent. No questions, no tears. Follow exactly. Understand?" Nods in the gloom, solemn as vows. Before the sentence completed, lantern light exploded across them like divine judgment. William Pike stepped from behind the smokehouse, lantern in one hand casting hellish glow, pistol in the other glinting coldly. Behind him, Robert Thornton, face illuminated with grim triumph, four neighbors, armed with rifles and resolve, forming a semicircle of entrapment. "I told you she'd come back," Thornton said, voice thick with satisfaction, a man vindicated. "I told you all, she'd return for them eventually." Sallie shoved her children behind her, body a frail barrier against iron and intent. Mind raced, escape routes blocked, children too slow for flight. Surrounded. Doomed. "Evening, Sallie." Pike's tone mocking, pale eyes unblinking. "We've been expecting you." "This was a trap," Sallie said slowly, realization dawning like a plague. "You knew." "Of course." Thornton advanced, boots crunching gravel. "Since March. Men stationed nightly for 6 weeks. The question was when, not if." "The child at the well?" "I instructed Beatrice, midnight, extra food tomorrow. Useful bait, children." Nausea rose in Sallie's throat. She had walked into it, children in tow. Love's pull, weaponized perfectly. "What now?" Voice flat, masking inner storm. "Choices." Thornton gestured, Pike advanced with rope. "You've embarrassed me twice, cost time, money, reputation. Neighbors whisper weakness. Ends tonight. Bound till dawn, public spectacle. Educational. Permanent. Don't." Sallie stepped forward. "I'll do anything. Don't hurt them." "Not planning to hurt them." Thornton smiled thinly. "Planning to sell 4 separate buyers. Texas to Florida. Scattered. You'll never know." In that instant, children trembling behind, weapons closing, Sallie transcended choice. Twice she fled freedom's call, twice love dragged her back. Thornton believed he owned that love, turned it to chains unbreakable. But he misjudged, Sallie had evolved beyond self. Choices now rooted in righteousness, divine imperative echoing scripture, greater love hath no man than this. "I have a proposal," she said quietly. Thornton arched brow. "No position to negotiate. Let them go. Safe passage north. In exchange I stay. Submit to punishment. Never escape again. Work lifelong without complaint. Children free. Laughter from neighbors, one Grove Hill planter, not how it works, girl. Thornton silenced them, curiosity flickering. You'd forfeit freedom, endure severe punishment, lifelong slavery, for 4 valuable assets I could sell profitably? Yes. Voice steady, resonant. Keeping me, under those terms, worth more. A slave trading liberty for children's? Voluntarily choosing bondage? Powerful story. Propaganda, slaves prefer plantation security to freedom's uncertainty. Worth more than any auction price. Silence stretched, thick as fog. Thornton waited, calculus of control versus cash. If I refuse? Then explain tomorrow, 6 armed men capturing 1 woman, 4 children. Security failures, 2 escapes, infiltration. Questions of competence. Embarrassment worsens. Children pressed against her back, silent tremors. Sallie prayed forgiveness for impending sacrifice. I won't sell them, Thornton conceded. Nor free. Bound out, hired labor, different plantations. Contracts return them yearly. Separated, but alive, accounted. You remain, strict supervision. Example of maternal devotion proving our system's benevolence. Not freedom. Far from hope. But life. Possibility, someday, paths to liberty. I agree. Dawn broke bloody over the fields, sun rising like accusatory eye. Whipping spectacle, slaves from 3 plantations assembled, air heavy with dread. Sallie tied to post, back exposed. Pike delivered 20 lashes, mechanical, precise, each crack echoing like sin's retribution. She made no sound, teeth clenched, eyes fixed heavenward. Children forbidden to watch, they did anyway, lined among witnesses, witnessing mother's crucifixion for their sake. Thornton addressed crowd, loyalty, bonds master-slave, Sallie's return proving freedom's illusion versus plantation security. Propaganda, as predicted. But it bought her children's lives. 2 weeks later, children bound out. Louisa to Grove Hill House, Beatrice near Mobile, Thomas and Marcus to farmers, annual feast to Thornton. Christmas visits, 1 hour yearly. Sallie endured 17 more years on Thornton land. Housework till age bent her, then mending, shelling peas, guiding young slaves. No further escapes. No spoken tales. Yet story spread, whispers, coded spirituals, invisible grapevine. Legend grew, magical powers, devil's pact, angelic aid. Truth simpler, profounder, mother-loving children more than freedom, understanding radical acts sometimes return, not flight. Emancipation 1865, fragments survive. 1870 census, 4 cranes scattered Alabama, Mississippi. 1873 letter, Louisa inquiring education, crediting mother's secret teaching. 1868 New Richmond article, elderly Alabama woman thanking shepherd, for northern children. Sallie? She died 1870, age 47, unmarked grave behind quarters. Plantation burned in war's final months, records lost. Yet story persists, oral histories, whispers, fragments. Historians debate, mistake, manipulation serving slavocracy? Or profound insight, true freedom in value-aligned choices, autonomy amid chains? Both right. Truth complicated, painful, no easy lessons. Sallie never reached permanent freedom. But in agency stripping system, she chose 3 times. Imperfect, agonizing freedom, paid in suffering, but hers. Tombigbee flows on, Thornton land now farms, suburbs. No marker, no monument. But on quiet nights, some claim hearing footsteps south, woman returning, again, for children never fully saved, never abandoned. Story without heroes/villains, people choosing in choice-robbing world. Challenges, freedom, love, sacrifice. Asks us, what would you sacrifice? Strength for 3 times, knowing cost? Sallie Crane's legacy, in bonds, she chose. Perhaps that's freedom's truest form. This finale immerses in cinematic dread, lanterns' harsh glare, lash cracks, dawn's merciless light, sensory textures of rope bite, blood scent, river's eternal murmur. Emotionally, gut-wrenching empathy for children's terror, dread in traps springing, curiosity in bargains tension, profound reflection on love's cost amid divine justice's shadow. Pacing builds to climactic negotiation, then reflective close, haunting, spiritually charged with redemption's undertones, sin's legacy broken through sacrifice. A mother's odyssey ends not in triumph, but transcendent choice echoing eternally along forgotten rivers.